This all happened back when I was in my first rented house. At 22 years old, I decided it was time to have some independence and move out from my parents' house. So I found the cheapest place I could afford by myself, and I'd been there for maybe 9 or 10 months when this all went down. But before I get into that, we need to take a quick trip back to my childhood to provide some context. But I promise this part will be quick, and then we'll get right back to the action. Now, I don't know about anyone else, but as a kid, I was always terrified of having to leave my room to go to the toilet at night. There was just something about traversing that dark hallway that made me feel like I wasn't alone, like something was waiting for me. The hairs on the back of my neck would stand up, I'd get a little rush of adrenaline, and my hands would start to shake. It terrified me. But the worst part was having to go past the stairs and the impenetrable blackness that they led down into. My footsteps always sped up as I went past them, and I was convinced that a groping hand or a tentacle or some other horror would just reach out of the darkness and grab me. So whenever I had to do it, because sometimes you just have to go, I made it my one rule to never look down the stairs. Even as a kid, I knew that logically there should be nothing there. But when you're a kid in the dark, logic plays second fiddle to that more primitive part of your minds that fears the monsters in the dark. I didn't want to look down into that dark abyss to let my eyes slowly adjust and risk seeing something that I was never meant to see. Somehow, it seemed that if I saw something down there, then it would become aware that I was there and it would come for me. So all through my childhood, I never looked down the stairs if the lights were off. And this didn't change as I got older. The habit just kind of stuck with me even when I mostly got over my fears. As I mentioned, I was now in my own place for the first time. A small rundown 2-bed mid-terrace house in a small cul-de-sac. Honestly, the place was a dump that should not have been legal to rent with all the issues it had. But it was cheap and I was young and I didn't really mind roughing it to have my own space. I'd been living there for about 9.5 months when one night I woke up needing to go to the toilet. So half asleep, I stumbled to the bathroom, not turning on any lights as I didn't want to wake myself up any more than necessary. Just to give you a sense of the layout of the upstairs, directly across the small landing opposite my bedroom is the second, smaller bedroom. Then to the left, in the middle of the landing, is the bathroom. Directly opposite the bathroom are the stairs, which lead straight down into the living room. I'll spare you the details of my trip to the bathroom, except that as I'm coming out, still half asleep, I catch my toe on one of the floor tiles. Like I said before, this house was a crap hole. That bathroom must have been fitted well over a decade ago and on the cheapest budget. Wear and tear had left half the tiles cracked, the taps leaked constantly, and there was the start of a major mold problem in multiple places. And normally, it doesn't really bother me too much. I'm used to the poorly fitted raised floor tiles and I avoid tripping on them. But not that night. That night, in my half asleep, half awake state, I stubbed my big toe and tripped on my way out of the door. Thankfully, I managed to shoot out a hand and, just in time, caught myself on the door frame, stopping myself from falling flat on my face or, even worse, straight down the stairs that are directly opposite. But as I did so, I found myself looking down the stairs and into that murky darkness at the bottom, something I had avoided doing since I was a child. I like to think of myself as a very rational person. I know that, logically, it doesn't make any sense for there to be anything down there. But in that moment, still clinging to the bathroom door frame, all those childhood fears just come rushing back. And in that instance, I just wanted to run back to my room, lock the door, hide under the covers just like I did as a child, like the blanket was some sort of impenetrable barrier that could keep monsters at bay. But I just couldn't make myself move because I knew that there was something down there and I knew that it could see me. I don't know how I knew it. I couldn't see anything, just the stairs leading down to blackness, and the only thing that I could hear was the relentless dripping of the bathroom tap. But I knew. And as I stood there, my eyes began to adapt to the darkness, and then I could make out a humanoid silhouette at the foot of the stairs, still barely visible, just a deeper blackness than the surroundings. And guys, I don't know how long I actually stood there. It was probably a couple minutes at most. But when you're in that situation, it feels like forever. Everything just slows down as the adrenaline starts pumping through your system. People always talk about fight or flight, but they often forget the third, more common occurrence, freeze. For those that don't know, on the face of it, freezing up in the face of danger might sound like a dumb move. But it's actually an evolutionary survival tactic hardwired into a lot of animals, people included. Predators are drawn to movement, so by freezing, you reduce the chance of being noticed by the predator. And that was exactly what happened to me at that point. I froze, just hoping that whatever predator was at the foot of my stairs would leave me alone. But then the first step of my stairs creaked as this thing started towards me, and suddenly its face came into view, and I knew immediately this thing was not human. It had a pale, bloated, toad-like face with these bulging white eyes and these thin lips on a mouth that was already stretched way too wide as it grinned up at me. Honestly, it looked like some sort of horrifying mashup of Jabba the Hutt and Lord Voldemort. And at this point, my heart is just pounding in my chest. Like, it's going so fast that I'm surprised I didn't have a heart attack right there and then. I wanted to scream. Maybe I even did, I'm not sure. All I know for sure is that that was when I was finally able to move again. Freezing was clearly not going to cut it anymore, and if I was going to have any hope of survival, it was flight time. The next thing I know, I'm back in the bedroom, I'm barricading the door with my chest of drawers and anything else that I can throw in front of it. Then I back myself into the corner, grabbing the baseball bat from under my bed, and then waiting and listening. The house was silent. I was expecting to hear that thing coming towards me, to hear its footsteps creaking up the stairs, to hear it smashing down the door until there was nothing between me and it. I checked my phone, it was 2:30 a.m. I considered calling the police, but what would I tell them? That a monster was coming up my stairs? I'd get arrested for wasting police time. And even worse than getting arrested, I'd have to go down them stairs to let them in. And no matter how quiet it had been, I was not about to leave this room until I absolutely had to. After about 10-15 minutes pass by and I'm still not hearing anything, I start to relax just a little bit. I sit back in the corner, the bat resting on my knees, ready to go if I need to. And eventually, I must have fallen asleep because the next thing I know, I'm waking up to the daylight creeping in around the edges of the curtains. The door is still barricaded shut, and I can hear the people in the house next door starting to get ready for their day. So, reluctantly, I clear the stuff away from the door and I open it just enough to peek out onto the landing, while being ready to slam it shut again if I do see anything out there. But the landing is empty, so bat in hand, ready to start swinging if I need to, I tiptoe onto the landing and look down the stairs. But there's nothing, there's no monster, the stairs are completely empty. And to be honest, at this point I'm starting to feel a little bit stupid. It's daylight, there's clearly nothing in the house, and the logical part of my brain is now back in charge. I'm still cautious as I go down the stairs and search the house, but I already know that I'm not going to find anything. There are no such thing as monsters. By the time I've showered, had some breakfast and finished getting ready for work, I've half convinced myself that last night was some sort of sleepwalking nightmare and I'm just trying to put it out of my mind. It's a Friday, so I only have to struggle through one more day of work before I can catch up on some sleep. After last night, my plan for the Saturday is to stay in bed as long as possible, to catch up on my sleep, ready to go do something in the afternoon. That said, at that moment, I wanted to spend as little time in that house as possible. I called up a few of the guys and arranged to go for a few drinks at the local pub after work. Nothing too heavy, just a few pints, watching the footy and shooting some pool. Just something to keep my mind off things and to keep me out of that house for a little bit longer. But when we get there, one of my buddies, Jay, he can tell that something isn't quite right with me. I guess he's always been the one that's most in touch with his emotional side. And that's not to say he was emotional. In fact, he was one of the most level-headed, logical people I know. I just mean to say that he's emotionally mature, and I guess because of that, he was able to see the signs in me that I was a little off my game, when all the other guys just remained oblivious. So when we had a moment, he pulled me to the side and he just asked what was going on and if I was okay. And I just shrugged him off and told him that I was just tired from a bad night's sleep. Not because I think he'd laugh at me or anything, I'm just not ready to talk about the previous night. I just want to forget it ever happened and move on. And I could tell that he doesn't quite believe me, but he didn't push the issue. Just let me know that he was there if I needed anything. It was around 11 p.m. when everyone decided to call it quits, and by that point, I'd had a few beers, I felt good. And despite being tired from the night before, I wasn't quite ready to go to bed just yet. It felt wrong to waste a Friday night on sleep. Besides, I had no plans for the morning, so when I got back home, I headed up to my bedroom and booted up my PlayStation, and then I just wasted a few hours playing some games. By the time I decided to call it a night, it had just gone 2 a.m. I turned off the TV and that was when I heard it. The creaking of that bottom step of the stairs. I froze, holding my breath as I listened, terrified all over again. I couldn't write this off as some nightmare. I hadn't been to sleep yet. And I know old houses creak all the time. I was familiar with all those noises. And I was familiar with the creak of each step of that house. Just like last night, someone or something was on that first step. And then the second step creaked, and my heart just dropped. Just like the night before, I stood there in silence listening, waiting for that third creak that would tell me it was coming up the stairs to get me. But that third creak never came. Eventually, I did the only thing I could think to do. I barricaded the door again, dove under my covers, and hid there like a child. And I know I'm probably going to get a lot of comments from people saying that, oh, I should have manned up and gone to confront this thing, defend my castle and all that, or just people saying what they would have done in that situation. But I just want to say, until you are actually in that situation, you don't know how you're going to react. As with the night before, eventually I woke up to sunlight, and now I knew that I had to do something. I couldn't deny it anymore. I had to be ready for that next night. I had to see if that thing that I saw on the first night really was creeping up my stairs each night. But there was no way I was going to go out onto that landing and look down those stairs again. I had a better idea. I won't bore you with the details of my day, but I went into town and bought myself a cheap baby monitoring system. The picture on it was grainy, but it had night vision, which was exactly what I needed. I set the camera up at the top of the stairs and then went and had an afternoon nap, just so that I'd be ready to stay up all night if I needed to. I was going to get to the bottom of this. I played some games to kill the time while I waited, the baby monitor propped in front of me showing a grainy green filtered image of the empty staircase. I just switched games, putting the Metal Gear Solid disc in the console, ready for a bit of stealth espionage action, when the baby monitor screen went blank and the no signal message popped up on the screen. Then the bottom stair creaked. That thing was there again, and the baby monitor had just crapped out on me. I knew it wasn't a coincidence, that it wasn't a fluke the monitor had stopped working just seconds before the stairs started creaking. Whatever was out there, it was doing this. The second stair creaked, and I knew that there would be a third. Each night, this thing was going to climb one step more, one step closer, until it got to the top. Then, just like I knew it would, that third stair creaked, and then there was silence, just like the night before. And in an odd way, I actually felt a little relieved. For that night at least, as long as I stayed in my room, I knew that I was safe. There was a definite pattern now to how this thing was behaving, and whilst the thought of it finally reaching the top of the stairs was terrifying, I knew I had some time to figure something out. I wasn't in immediate danger. There were 12 steps on that staircase. That meant I had 9 more nights to stop this thing. The next day was Sunday, and I'd already decided to call in sick to work for the week. There was no way that I could deal with this thing and all the late nights and still be able to focus on my work. Besides, if my worst fears come true and this thing did get me, this could be my last week alive. I wasn't going to waste that on a company that would just replace me within 2 weeks if I died. I spent most of that Sunday brainstorming ideas to try and Googling a bunch of weird terms like monsters coming up the stairs and don't look down the stairs at night. Honestly, anyone reviewing my browsing history would think I'd lost it. And hey, maybe I had. That was as good an explanation as any I could find for what was happening. In the end, I knew I needed help, and the one person I thought would be understanding about it was Jay. He already knew something was off with me from that Friday night, and out of all of my friends, he was the one I trusted not to treat it all like it was some big joke. But when I called Jay, it turned out he couldn't meet up that day, so instead we arranged to meet for lunch the next day on Monday, which meant I had to plan for night number 4 on my own. I didn't really have much of a plan other than to make sure I left every single light on in that house. My childhood fear had been looking down the stairs at night, and it only ever applied when it was dark. If it wasn't dark, there would be nowhere for that thing to come from. I even took the couple lamps I had and placed them halfway up the stairs, running extension leads so that I could plug them in. But when it got to 2:30 AM again, I watched on the monitor as one by one, each light flickered, then switched off. The lamps were the last to go dark, and then the monitor once again lost signal. The stairs were once again completely dark, and I was trapped in the room, unable to see as that thing came from the darkness and creaked its way up to the 4th step and stopped, just like I'd known it would. But that's what I'd counted on. I had my phone ready and I'd recorded everything, the lights flickering out on the monitor losing signal, and the creaking steps. It wasn't much, but at least now I had something to show Jay, something to show that I wasn't just making this all up, something to show that I wasn't going insane, and while I was still terrified, it felt good to have made the recording, like I'd won some sort of tiny victory. And I slept better that night than I had the previous 3, and by the time I woke up, I was almost running late to make it to lunch, so I just threw on my jeans and hoodie from the day before, quickly washed up, and then headed out the door. And let me tell you, Jay, he reacted exactly the way I had expected him to when I told him everything over lunch.
There was no joking or mocking like I would have expected from my other friends, and that makes my other friends sound like bad guys, but that's not the case. We just have that sort of relationship where we can take a joke about things and still know that we'd be there for each other if needed. But Jay could see right away that this was one of those situations that was more serious, while my other friends would have taken a little longer to get there. So I spared no details when explaining what had been happening. He got it all: the fear from my childhood, the face I saw at the bottom of the stairs, and everything that had happened since. And he let me finish without interrupting, but I could see the concern in his eyes. He was looking at me like I was having some sort of mental breakdown, and he was trying to figure the best way to deal with the situation. So when I'm done with the story, I play him the clip on my phone, and I can tell that it catches him a little bit by surprise, but he's still not entirely buying what he's seeing. He's very much a straight shooter, scientific type, not the sort to believe in anything supernatural, so I know he's trying to come up with some logical explanation, but there's that slight hint of doubt now. He knows that this isn't entirely in my head, because I have the video proof that something did happen. And he took his time responding, but finally he sighed and looked me in the eye and just said, "Looks like we're having a sleepover." And I can't tell you how relieved I felt that he'd suggested that, because now there would be two of us, and when he experienced it for himself, I wouldn't be alone in this, and we could start finding a solution together. But Jay still had to finish up work for the day, so he didn't get to mine until late that evening. I ordered us a couple pizzas and set up the air mattress on the bedroom floor, then we kicked back and watched a movie. I noticed Jay casting a few concerned looks my way, like he was watching for any unusual behaviour or some other sign of mental instability. I just looked at him and said, "Dude, I'm fine, just trust me. When it gets to 2:30, you'll see that I am not making this up." But then 2:30 came and went with no unusual activity. The monitor kept its signal, the light stayed on, and nothing came up the stairs. We gave it till 3:30 just to be sure before calling it a night, but it took me a lot longer to get to sleep. I couldn't figure out if I should be happy that nothing happened and that maybe we'd broken the cycle, or should I be upset that I'd just been made to look crazy. And obviously I felt guilty because I'd dragged Jay over, wasting his time only for nothing to have happened. He left early the next morning to get to work, and I apologised profusely and, assured him that I was fine and that I'd check in with him soon. I just need to see what would happen the next night, to see if that monster would return, or if bringing someone else in had scared it off somehow. So as it got later in the day, I was starting to get more and more nervous about what that night would bring, and a lot more nervous than I'd been on the previous nights. And while I was also a little hopeful that nothing would happen and I could just forget this whole thing and go back to living my life, I was also scared, because if this thing came back, it meant that I really was on my own. But even worse than that, it meant that this thing somehow knew when I was alone, and that it was going to come for me when I had nobody. And as nighttime rolled around again, I got everything ready. I turned on all the lights, set up the camera, and barricaded myself in the room. Then I put on a movie to kill the time and try to distract myself, but it didn't work. I barely remember what happened in the movie. I just kept glancing at my phone and the monitor the whole time. Finally, it got to just before 2:30, and I had major butterflies in my stomach. I turned the TV off and focused all my attention on the monitor, listening for any sound that was out of the ordinary, but all I could hear was the sound of a car a couple streets away just obnoxiously revving its engine. Then a minute later, that too was gone and everything was silent. And that's when all the lights went out. And I don't just mean the lights that I could see on the monitor like last time. This time, my bedroom light went out too, and in that instant, I knew that something was terribly wrong. The monitor actually stayed on for a couple more seconds, just long enough to switch to night mode and reveal a dark shape at the bottom of the stairs before it lost signal. Then I hear that first step creak. My palms are sweaty, the hairs on the back of my neck are standing up, and I can feel the adrenaline starting to pump through my body. This was a fear that I hadn't felt since that first night when I saw that thing. Somehow I instinctively knew something had changed and something was terribly wrong. The second stair creaked, then the third and the fourth, and I'm thinking, okay, just one more step, then this ends for tonight. That's how this worked, one step closer each night. I still had time to figure this out. The fifth step creaked, and then the sixth, and my heart dropped. It took everything I had not to fly into a full-on panic at that point. I tried to tell myself it was just making up for the day it missed, that I still had time, that this thing wasn't coming all the way to get me tonight. But then the seventh step creaked and all notion that I was safe evaporated instantaneously. And for that moment, I was too scared to move. My baseball bat lay on my bed and I couldn't even bring myself to pick it up. But then the eighth step creaked and my brain finally clicked into gear and I started to move. but I didn't go for the bat. I wasn't planning to fight this thing off. I needed to get out of there. And thankfully, I was still fully dressed, not having wanted to get too comfortable just in case something had gone wrong. And as the ninth stair creaked, I ran to my window and threw it open. And I don't know if it could hear my movements or feel the cold air or something, but the monster must have realised I was trying to get away because it ran up those last few steps, the stairs groaning under its weight, and as I was lowering myself out of the window, I heard it crash into the bedroom door. And all I can say is thank God I barricaded that door, because the force that hit it made the house shake, and that thing would have been in the room before I'd managed to get out. But the barricade wasn't going to stop it for long. It was nothing but a speed bump to this thing. But that was all I really needed right now, to slow it down, to delay it getting into the room. I lowered myself so that I was hanging from the window ledge by my fingertips, trying to get as close to the ground as possible before letting myself drop to the pavement below. It was only a first floor room, or second floor to any Americans that might be listening, so I was confident I wouldn't do any serious damage from the floor, but the last thing I wanted was to twist an ankle or do any other sort of injury that was going to stop me getting away as quickly as possible. And thankfully I didn't, so when I hit the pavement, I got straight back up and ran down the street to where I knew my car was parked, thanking every God I could think of that I hadn't taken my keys out of my pocket. I made it to the car with no sign of pursuit, but I didn't let that slow me down. I put the keys in the ignition and I floored it out of there. Now, it was a one-way street, so I did have to drive back past my house, and I couldn't help but glance up at my bedroom as I passed, and for just a split second, I saw that horrifying face staring at me from the open window. Needless to say, I never spent another night in that house. I waited until the sun had been up for a few hours, and drove back to my street. It was almost impossible to get a spot on my street in the evenings or weekends, but at that time of day, most people had gone to work, so I was able to park right outside my house. And I sat in that car for about 30 minutes, just staring up at the still open window before I managed to build up the courage to go inside. I didn't know what I was going to find when I unlocked that door, but thankfully the house was empty. I threw everything I owned into the back of that car as quickly as possible, locked the door, and drove straight to my parents' house. And I didn't know that leaving the house would stop that monster coming for me. I didn't know what sort of rules it was playing by, so I spent the next few weeks on edge every night. I'd make sure I stayed awake until at least 3 a.m, just listening carefully for any creaking steps. I even tied my old climbing rope around the bed each night so that if I needed to, I had a quick escape out the window. Thankfully, I never needed to, but still, to this day, I avoid leaving my room at night if I can help it. I always leave a light on downstairs, but in those rare instances where I do have to leave my room at night and there are no lights on, I can feel that something is down there in the darkness, just waiting for me to look. So please, if you do find yourself on the landing in the darkness at night, don't look down the stairs.